Hi, everybody. Welcome to my last lecture for you. This is an introduction to cybersecurity risk and the risk assessment process. This is a lesson in structured judgment. You'll learn to define cyber risk, distinguish risk from threat or vulnerability, and apply basic models for assessing and managing it. You'll consider how risk influences security choices and why no system can be made risk-free. Excuse me. Risk is a part of everyday life. For example, take driving risk. So it has impact and likelihood scenarios. We're going to look at these. So say, for instance, if we had high impact, low likelihood scenario, it'd be like getting into a serious accident due to a distracted driver. Significant harm, but hopefully infrequent. What if it's low impact and high likelihood? This would be like getting a small scratch on your car while parking. And boy, these parking spaces are getting smaller, aren't they? I've got a nice white little scratch on my car. It's annoying, but it's not major damage, and it happens, right, fairly often. But what about moderate impact or moderate likelihood? It's like getting a flat tire on the highway. It's inconvenient and moderately likely over time. It's probably going to happen to you. Risk judgments are not statements of fact. They involve subjective assessments, uncertainties, and value-based considerations rather than purely objective truths. As you work through this lesson, you might find yourself disagreeing with certain risk assessments. For example, you may feel uneasy about a statement that rates the likelihood of a serious accident due to a distracted driver as low. This reaction is natural. It's good because risk judgments are based on estimations of likelihood and impact, not absolute truths. The key takeaway is that all risk assessments involve uncertainty and subjectivity, shaped by different perspectives, available data, and underlying values. Recognizing this helps us critically engage with risk-related decisions rather than treating them as fixed truths. Cybersecurity risk is assessed on two key factors: likelihood, okay, how probable, is this going to happen? And impact and harm. If the threat occurs, how damaging would it be? A high likelihood, high impact risk requires immediate action, while a low likelihood, low impact risk may be accepted. In the industry matrix, like we're going to see in a second here, I'll flip back and forth a couple times, is commonly used to create levels of likelihood and impact. So here you can see it here. There's likelihood on the left, impact on the top. Okay. So likelihood is described in levels as very likely, you can see them here listed, possible, unlikely, and very unlikely. And impact is described in levels such as negligible, minor, moderate, significant, and severe. So a threat that is very unlikely to happen and would have negligible impact if it did happen is considered to be a low risk. Conversely, a threat that is very likely to happen and would have severe consequences is a high risk. I love the colors here, right? Red is bad, low is greenish color, medium, right? Caution when you're in the middle. So you can see that. You don't have to have 5 levels. Some organizations use 3 or 4, and so you do have an exercise where you can practice this. If you want to do that now and come back to the lecture, that's up to you. But you can see in this slide that organizations can use all sorts of different kinds of matrix, but the likelihood times impact, that remains the same for all of them. On this slide, you'll see a diagram. Okay, and we're going to go through this diagram in just a little bit. It will help you as you work through the next exercise. Hopefully it'll help you as you're coming up with your own risk assessment. The cybersecurity risk assessment is an inherently subjective process because it relies on estimating likelihood and impact without definitive actuarial data. Unlike fields like insurance or finance, where historical data and probability models can precisely calculate risk, cybersecurity threats are constantly evolving, and their probability depends on unpredictable factors. Okay? Emerging vulnerabilities, like we've talked about in this course, attacker behavior, right? We've talked about in this course. So you can see we're starting to bring all of this into context now. But despite its subjectivity, risk assessment remains the best tool available for making informed security decisions. The goal is not to produce perfect risk scores, but to create structured and consistent approach to evaluating threats. Okay? We want that structured and consistent approach. Even though different people might rate the same risk slightly differently, the process of identifying, prioritizing, and managing risk is essential for effective cybersecurity. So let's take a look at this diagram. Okay. So, and again, this is going to help you with the case study of a risk assessment on Mousetrap Inc. Okay. We're going to look at the steps down the middle first in white. Step 1 is called system characterization, right? This step defines the system under review, ensuring a clear scope before identifying threats. So what are you working with here? Excuse me again. You're looking for what is our system? Is this a system of a system? What's it hosting? You have client contracts, source code. What are our components? Well, who are our users of this system, right? What are our security requirements that are already in place? Those are the things that we want to look at under step 1. When we get to the next step, threat identification, this step highlights the most relevant security threats that need to be assessed for vulnerabilities. Okay, so what are those threats? Are they insider threats? Is it a misconfiguration of some controls? Are they external hackers or phishing attacks? Step 3 is where we identify our vulnerabilities. Identifying vulnerabilities helps the team understand how threats could exploit security gaps. So you need to evaluate known weaknesses in the system that attackers could exploit. So are we using MFA, multi-factor authentication? Everything that we've talked about in this course, are there weak passwords? Is there unpatched software? Are we have our controls misfigured? Are our employees trained on phishing attacks? What to do? All of those. Step 4 is called control analysis. So we need to understand, and understanding existing controls helps determine whether additional security measures are needed. So we need to review existing security controls to determine what protections are already in place. Are there firewalls? Do we have access control, RBAC, perhaps? We want to identify any gaps. Are things misconfigured? Are we reviewing our controls? Do we have phishing prevention? That is what would be called control analysis. Step 5 is where we start our likelihood. So think back to that risk matrix that we just discussed. So in this, the team estimates how likely each threat is to exploit a vulnerability and decide the following, right? Assigning likelihood helps prioritize which threats need immediate action. So what do we consider a high likelihood, a medium likelihood, a low likelihood? Okay. Step 6. So keep thinking about these as you go through our case study exercise next. Step 6 is we want to analyze the impact. So again, here's that risk matrix coming into our dialogue. So the team needs to evaluate the potential consequences of a successful attack. So we need to identify impact, and that ensures that the most damaging risks are addressed first, right? So we've got a threat. Does it have a severe impact? Does it have a high impact? Is it moderate? Is it low? What's the damage that will be caused from a successful attack? That's impact analysis. Step 7 then is our risk determination. So this really brings us back to our risk matrix. Risk levels determine which threats require immediate action. So when we're determining a risk by combining likelihood and impact, we can assign an overall risk level, and like we looked at in the matrix. Step 8, okay, what are we going to recommend? Here's our control recommendations. To reduce the risk, we need to recommend some security improvements. This step provides actionable steps to reduce risk to an acceptable level. Remember, this is just acceptable. And so we'll kind of talk about these strategies. So we'll have a mitigation strategy or an avoidance strategy. Okay, so we want to come up with the risk, right? We've identified those. We want to develop some sort of recommendation, and then what kind of strategy is that? Finally, step 9 is we want to document our results. We need to document the findings in a formal risk assessment report for management, whoever requested the report, and it should include a summary of system characterization, so from beginning to end. It should include the identified threats and vulnerabilities. It should include our likelihood and impact analysis and the overall risk levels and recommendations. So they could be short-term goals, long-term strategies. What are our recommendations? Here's our team, what we've come up with. Okay. Now, if you look on the left, in the kind of bluish purple, there's inputs for all of these. If you look on the right of each step, there's an output. So again, let's go back to systems, since we covered systems a lot at the beginning of this course, right? So what's our system interfaces? What's in our system for hardware? What do we have for software? The data, all right, is so important. Who's using this? And then the output for a system, right? What are our boundaries? How does the system function? Again, what is our system and data sensitivity? We need to identify all of that. Goes on to step 2. You can see step 2, maybe there's data from intelligence that we get, but we need a threat statement, right? And so forth and so on. So you can take a look at the inputs and outputs for each step as well. Okay, so understanding risk is we need to know it's the combination of likelihood of a threat event and its potential impact. We need to remember that risk assessment involves structured judgment, but it's inherently subjective. Risk matrices, we looked at that, are common to categorize and prioritize risks, right? We want to take care of those high likelihood, high impact risks first. And of course, we always want to remember that no system is going to be 100% risk-free. Cyber threats do not remain the same over time. You need to remember that. New vulnerabilities emerge, attack methods evolve, and defensive strategies must adapt to those. Continuous risk assessment is critical because, one, new software vulnerabilities are discovered daily. An outdated risk assessment may overlook newly exploitable weaknesses. Attackers change tactics. That requires organizations to reassess likelihood and impact regularly. Business operations evolve. What was once maybe a low impact risk may become critical due to changes in data storage or infrastructure or some sort of regulatory requirement. And external factors, such as new compliance laws, geopolitical events, can influence cybersecurity risks overnight. So to remain secure, organizations must treat risk assessment as an ongoing process, not a one-time evaluation. Okay, now good luck with the next exercise. I hope this helps.